reports. And the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says things are only going to get much worse as this government shutdown continues. The latest advisory shows staffing triggers at traffic control centers right now in New York and Philly. Over the weekend, the FAA said there were staffing issues at half of their facilities. So that included Nashville, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Florida, Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado, and Northern California. Nearly 80% of controllers were absent from New York area facilities.
Election day is tomorrow, and the candidates for New York City mayor are making their final pitch to voters. Polls still show socialist candidate Zoran Mamdani in the lead over independent candidate Andrew Cuomo and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa. Sliwa has rejected calls to drop out of the race, saying the people will decide the next mayor, not political insiders and billionaires.
I trust people. I don't trust politicians. I don't trust billionaires. And I don't trust the insiders. So that's my final words. And I end my campaign as I began my campaign and spent every day of my campaign with the people of New York City on the subway.
Tylenol's parent company has been sold. Jenny Casola reports.
Kenvue, the former Johnson & Johnson unit that makes Tylenol, Band-Aid, Neutrogena, and many other health products, is being sold to Kimberly-Clark, which makes Huggies diapers, Kleenex, and Cottonelle. Kimberly-Clark is paying more than $40 billion plus debt. It has been looking to expand into more products in health and wellness. President Trump has warned that acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol, is a potential cause of autism. Kenvue has called the claims baseless. Kimberly-Clark says it carefully considered all risks and opportunities while evaluating the Kenvue deal.
A new poll finds many Americans think we ought to roll back the COVID abortion drug policy from the Biden administration. Chris Woodward has more.
7 in 10 likely voters want to roll back the Biden-era policy and reinstate in-person doctor visits in order for a woman to be prescribed abortion drugs. Kelsey Pritchard of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America.
This poll really shows that it's not only the right thing to do to end mail-order abortions, but it's the politically smart thing to do for the administration.
Another finding, 57% of liberal voters are in favor of rolling back the Biden-era policy. Pritchard said that should speak volumes to the Food and Drug Administration, which has maintained this Biden rule that allows for the mail-order abortion drugs.
They can end that rule today and go back to the policy that was in place under Trump's first administration, and we're urging them to do so as soon as possible so that more women and girls don't end up in the ER and to save more unborn children.
Pritchard urges people to share this information with pro-life legislators, governors, and/or attorneys general to make sure that they know that this is very important and a common-sense move for the Trump administration.
We need to get to common sense here and end this Biden rule.
I'm Chris Woodward.
At this hour, the S&P 500 virtually unchanged. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 303 points, and the Nasdaq Composite is 0.4% higher. There's more news online at afn.net, and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
It's amazing how fast things can change. The breaking news you hear in the morning can take on a whole new life by that evening. And some days there's so much happening you really need a whole team of journalists to keep up with it all. The American Family News app not only gives you that team, you get a biblical perspective on politics, pro-life, education, and much more wherever you are. Stay on top of the latest news facing Christians today. Get the AFN app from your app store and you'll never miss a thing.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Walker Wildmon here on today's program. Glad to have you with us on American Family Radio. Let's turn our attention to the scripture, and then we'll jump into some of the news of the week. John chapter 1 is where we are this week. John chapter 1, looking at verse 14. of John chapter 1. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John chapter 1, verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and beheld his glory, and the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. That's John chapter 1, verse 14. I want to remind you of Operation Christmas Child. We are promoting this until November 24th. National Collection Week is coming up on the week of the 17th through the 24th of November, and between now and then you can pack a shoebox. The goal of Operation Christmas Child and Samaritan's Purse is to reach 12.6 million children with the gospel through a simple shoebox gift, and you can be a part of helping reach that goal. I've got my shoebox, my family's shoebox in my vehicle, ready to pack and distribute. And the one thing of many things that I love about what Samaritan's Purse does here is they not only deliver the shoebox, but they, more importantly, deliver the gospel to some of the most remote places in the world. So National Collection Week is the 17th through the 24th. SamaritansPurse.org/OCC to learn more. SamaritansPurse.org/OCC to learn more and find a drop-off location near you. And if for some reason you can't pack a shoebox, you can donate, and Samaritan's Purse will pack a shoebox for you. SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. All right, jumping into the news of the week, the government is still shut down, and some would say that's a good thing, but on a serious note, it's beginning to have some pretty severe consequences. And the airports are probably the most affected portion of our economy and our society when it comes to a government shutdown because of the TSA and the FAA and the various roles that they play in keeping the airlines moving. The various airports have had staggering delays, whether it's delays because of air traffic control staffing shortages or even the TSA lines being lengthened because of the lack of staff. And let me just explain kind of how this works from a government employee vantage point. The government employees will get paid. Whenever the government does reopen, they will be paid. They will be compensated. They'll be back paid, if you will, for hours worked while the government is shut down. And so this is not as if, people are working and they're never going to get paid for their work. That's just not true. They're going to get paid. It just might be 2, 4, 6 weeks after they were supposed to have been paid, depending on when the government reopens. And so all of these workers, whether it's FAA, TSA, etc., are going to get paid when the government reopens. We don't know when that's going to be. But it does hurt the agencies and the FAA, air traffic controllers, TSA, etc., because when people aren't being paid in real time, when they're supposed to, they're not incentivized to keep going to work. That's just a reality. And so the problem is you're having people take vacation time because they know they're not being paid on time, and so they're not incentivized to show up to work. And so that's basically what's happening here. And let me remind you, air traffic controllers were already facing staffing shortages even before this whole government shutdown. They were having a really hard time staffing up these control towers in a way that keeps things moving. That was a problem that existed even prior to the government shutdown. Sean Duffy, the transportation commissioner, or secretary rather, has been working on that since day one of President Trump's administration. And so that was a pre-existing problem, and then the government shutdown just makes matters worse. So that's what's going on here. Same thing with TSA, people calling in sick, not wanting to show up to work because they just missed a paycheck. And so they're not incentivized to show up to work when they're not going to get paid until weeks or months down the road for the work that they're doing now. So that's pretty much the problem. And there are some services that the Department of Transportation or even the FAA are having to prioritize or even not fund because the appropriations process has ended. And so let's play a clip here. This is a brief local news report about Houston, Texas, and the international airport there having a 3-hour line for TSA. Clip 1.
We're staying on top of those lines at Houston's airports this morning.
Bush Airport shut down TSA checkpoints in 3 of its terminals over the weekend because of staffing issues stemming from the government shutdown. So let's take you for a live look inside. This is Bush Terminal E, where lines once again are out the front door. Fly to Houston tracks TSA wait times at Bush. The wait times just for the security checkpoint are expected to be at least 180 minutes right now, 3 hours.
All right, well, there you have it. That's Houston Airport, Houston, Texas, 3-hour line just for TSA. Then you have, over the weekend, Newark, New Jersey, which I fly out of frequently. They had to do a full ground stop because of staffing shortages in the air control tower. And these kind of rolling delays and rolling ground stops are going on all around the country and major hubs. Dallas had the same experience a couple weeks ago, and this is all related. Much of it is related to the government shutdown. You know, I'm not sure. I don't know when the government's going to open. Some reports say this week sometime after the election tomorrow, which is an embarrassment to even say that. But I don't know. The Democrats aren't incentivized to reopen the government. I mean, tell me what the case is for them to reopen the government, because if they're willing to go to this length and go over 30 days now with the government shut down to, quote, prove their point or get what they want out of these negotiations, of which negotiations at this point aren't even taking place. The White House and the Democrats, they're not even talking anymore. Schumer and the Democrats aren't even talking to the White House or congressional Republicans anymore. There's been a complete stop in all communications. So there's no more negotiations. Everybody is kind of in their corner holding down. And so I don't know what the incentive is for Democrats to reopen this government, because you've gone this long, right? And so all of a sudden you're going to reopen it without getting anything out of these negotiations. And what they want, to be clear, Democrats want further expanded subsidization of Obamacare. That's what this is about, in part. There's also some funding for illegal immigrants in there that they want as well. But the essence of it is that during the COVID era, Democrats and Republicans expanded the subsidies for Obamacare because Obamacare has been a failing plan from day one. All right. Obamacare was the plan to, quote, provide a solution that isn't a solution and ultimately breaks the system. And then guess what? Democrats and the government step in and say, we'll save the day. This is part of their plan. They insert the government as part of the fix, and then everything breaks, and then they insert themselves again for the ultimate fix, which is a single-payer system. All right, so Obamacare is working as planned. It's ultimately going to fail, and the subsidies were meant to lessen the fall, if you will, of Obamacare. So Obamacare is unaffordable. On its face, it's unaffordable. So what do they do to make it, quote, look affordable? They do subsidies. And there were already subsidies built in. Going back to the original passing of Obamacare, there were already subsidies built in to make Obamacare look affordable. And you see my air quotes here, look affordable. But in reality, Obamacare is not affordable at all. So it was originally subsidized, and then the Democrats under Biden, they subsidized it even more, right? So this was like a double subsidy. And so that's what the Republicans are fighting over. Republicans aren't even wanting to rescind the original subsidies of Obamacare that were in the Affordable Care Act, or ACA. They're just wanting to stop the COVID-era subsidies that were on top of the original subsidies here. And so this isn't like the Republicans, even though I'll be fully in favor of it, this isn't as if the Republicans are like trying to gut Obamacare, right, through the regular budget process. That's just not the case at all. They're just simply trying to end this multi-billion-dollar additional subsidy that props up Obamacare. Obamacare is unaffordable. And the only thing that makes it look appealing is because the government keeps subsidizing it. And so this is purely a Democrat-created problem. And there's no expectation, there should be no expectation for this subsidy to continue. And after all, it was the Democrats under Biden that made this subsidy temporary. They put a sunset provision on the subsidy, and they could have made it permanent, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion. But instead, they made it temporary, and it's up for renewal or for review. And Republicans said, "Hey, we're not continuing to subsidize the failing Obamacare system beyond what we already have to through the original legislation." So that's what's being negotiated amongst some other things. And Republicans have finally said enough is enough, and they're not going to be extorted over this plan. And so somebody's going to have to come to the table. I think the Democrats ultimately are going to have to come to the table. But what brings them to the table, I'm not really sure, because they have been completely taken over by the radical elements of the party. And things like a government shutdown and making people hurt and using this as, quote, leverage, which is to quote the Democrats, this is part of their left-wing plan. I mean, this is the party of Antifa. This is the party of illegal immigrants. This is the party of defending Hamas. And I don't know why this radical element who has now taken over the party and is controlling Chuck Schumer, I don't know why they would want to come to the table at this point. There just seems to be no incentive. And the dark side of this entire political reality that we live in suggests that maybe the Democrats want something to break here. I mean, maybe the goal is to shut the government down to such a degree that critical systems and infrastructure begin to crumble and somebody gets hurt. God forbid somebody dies, and then Democrats can do their politicking that they do with every disaster, and they'll point the finger at the Republicans and say, all we wanted was some Obamacare setup subsidies, and now people are dead, right? I can hear the talking point now from Chuck Schumer and the likes. And so that's a little bit of speculation there. But remember, we're dealing with a very immoral party here. All right, Republicans got their problems. I've talked about it frequently. Republicans they're not the party of saints, so don't get me wrong here. But there's at least some semblance of moral decency in the Republican Party to kind of keep each other in check, right? Because the vast majority of the party is made up of Bible-believing Christians who have convictions and believe in morality and doing right and stopping evil. But the Democrats, on the other hand, I mean, who's kind of the moral voice of clarity in the Democrat Party? I mean, there is no moral voice of clarity in the Democrat Party. And so when you talk about, them Democrats being willing to hold the government hostage until something disastrous happens and then use it for political gain, that's not far-fetched, right? I mean, when you have a party that pushes abortion through 9 months, the killing of babies through 9 months, they promote this gender insanity of gender mutilation, sexual mutilation of little children. They defend Hamas. They downplay October 7th. They bash Israel at every turn. They are propping up these communist and outright socialist in Mondami, which is running for mayor of New York City. When you put all this together and kind of create this profile of what is the Democrat Party, then my theory about what they may be going at here is not really far-fetched. I mean, the Democrat Party has no bounds. They have no limits. Anything's on the table. All for politics. We'll be back in a few.
I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Instead of buying diapers from companies who give your hard-earned money to organizations that want to kill innocent image bearers, consider EveryLife. EveryLife provides high-quality, affordable diapers and wipes centered around the belief that every child is a gift from above that deserves to be loved, protected, and celebrated every day. Additionally, EveryLife offers the Buy for a Cause program that allows people to donate a month's supply of diapers and wipes to young, struggling families. In addition to selling diapers, EveryLife wants to use its business to cultivate a culture of life. Go to everylife.com for more information.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
Abraham, this is startling. Outside of the U.S., in the regions of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, as many as 9 of 10 new believers lack a Bible. They can't read God's precious promises. Would you remember Sabella in the Middle East? Only a couple of years ago, she could not read, but now she can, and she's praying for a Bible. Neo's a widowed mother of 4 in Kenya. Her husband was killed by the Boko Haram regime, but she wants to raise her children to know and love Jesus. She's praying for a Bible. And let me say thanks to Walter of Muskegon, Michigan, Constance of Lewisburg, West Virginia, and Teresa of Dubuque, Iowa. We want to bless 6,000 Bibleless believers around the world during this month of Thanksgiving. If you're grateful for your Bible, if God has used His Word to grow you, would you give that privilege to others today?
$5 sends a Bible. $100 sends 20. $500 sends 100. You can give by calling 800-YES-WORD. 800-YES-WORD. Or visit sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
Hey, my name is Wesley Wildmon.
And I'm Walker Wildmon.
And we're brothers, and our family have been leading tours to the land of the Bible for more than 30 years.
Coming up in March of 2026, we would love for you to join us for something very special, a Footsteps of Paul tour, a journey through Greece.
We'll walk exactly where the Apostle Paul walked, through Athens, ancient Corinth, Philippi, and Thessalonica.
You'll enjoy unforgettable experiences and meaningful fellowship with believers and with Wesley and Walker.
And we'll eat well, laugh a lot, and yes, eat well again. And most importantly, we will grow in our faith as the Bible comes alive before your eyes. You'll get to see the very things that we read about or that your pastor talks about in church.
The Footsteps of Paul tour is March 17th through the 24th, 2026.
Register today at wildmangroup.com.
That's wildmangroup.com. We can't wait to see you there.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. As a reminder, you can subscribe to the podcast. We would actually greatly appreciate it. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can click in, At the Core, type in At the Core, click the subscribe or the follow button, and the show will be queued up in your library each and every day. Well, we bring on guests from across the country, various positions, whether at the state level or the federal level, to bring our listeners up to speed on some of the issues of the day. We have on with us now Brad White, who is Executive Director at the Mississippi Department of Transportation, otherwise known as MDOT. He's on with us now to talk about the topic of infrastructure and deregulation, etc. Brad, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Brad, there's many things we could talk about. The topic of infrastructure is very broad, and you could go a lot of different directions. But tell us, since 2021, which is when you assumed your position, tell us some of the things that you've focused on as the director of the Department of Transportation, specifically in the state of Mississippi. What has been your priorities?
Well, we were a little bit of a state agency that was in a bit of a crisis. We had been losing a lot of our professional staff, a lot of our maintenance workers. The state legislature had not adjusted our funding model since 1987. And we were working with a budget that was decades old to deal with trying to upkeep and maintain over 30,000 lanes of highway miles in the state and over 5,500 bridges. So basically, to give it in a nutshell, we're a state agency, but we implement a federal program. We work hand in glove with the Federal Highway Administration to carry out their program in Mississippi. And so Congress every 5 years authorizes the Federal Highway Administration to do their work. And that gives us an idea of how much federal dollars we'll have, and then we can calculate how much state dollars it'll take in order to manage this reimbursement program of sorts that we have to use to build and maintain the highways and bridges around the state. So the last 4 years, we've been in a bit of a rebuilding phase for the agency itself. I'm afraid to say that we had lost a little bit of confidence in our state legislative leadership, maybe our congressional delegation. So we went to work to rebuild that, and did that by trying to move to do all of our work in in the light and the sunlight, being completely transparent with where the taxpayers' money went, trying to restructure our budget to make sure as much of the funds that we were given were going directly to the types of projects that the taxpayers would expect their money to go to. And that's paid dividends. We've regained favor with the legislature. Our credibility's increased to the point that they now view us as something worthy of investing in. And so our records and awards each year for the last 3 years have exceeded that before. We run about a $1.6 billion budget. In Mississippi, we've awarded over $1.3 billion in contracts that will be paid out, obviously, over the next few years in the course of life of those projects. But, we've been able to successfully convince our legislative leadership that everything that they do, whether it's public education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's economic development, all of it relies on the core function of government that is our infrastructure system. So we've tried to be good stewards of that money, and I think that that's getting us to a place where we've got the resources we need to do what we're supposed to do.
Let me ask you this. This is something I always think about often when I'm driving, is the balance between new development and maintenance on existing infrastructure. So I'm in North Mississippi. I'm in Tupelo. Seems like every other day we're adding a new road, a completely new development, a completely new road, which takes a lot of money and time to add that new road, whatever it is, whether it's, most of this is local stuff. But from your perspective, how do you balance these appeals to add new highways or extend this highway or extend this state road versus maintaining what we currently have? Because it just seems like there's so much already kind of within your purview to maintain, which is already hard enough. It seems like we should stop expanding, right, new roads and just start taking care of the ones we have. But how do you balance that priority out?
That's a very good question, and you made a distinguishment that's important. We only maintain state highways and interstate highways. So the local county and city governments, you're always seeing development on theirs. That's nothing to do with us. But we run two big programs. One is the maintenance program that you mentioned. The other one is what we call our capacity construction program. One's obviously designed to protect the investment the taxpayers currently have. One is designed that ideally would look at traffic projections 20 years into the future and try to make sure that we're advancing our system in a way that we can always accommodate the traffic flow in a safe and efficient manner. Now, while those are the two programs we run, what we're graded on is what you mentioned, and that is the maintenance of the existing system. So about 15 years ago, the department was faced with the decision of diverting money away from capacity in order to take care of the maintenance needs of the state. Our revenues had just become inadequate to do both. And so obviously the choice was made to get rid of the capacity program and focus on maintaining the existing system. Now, the problem with that is anywhere in Mississippi that you go, whether it's in DeSoto County, whether it's around the Tupelo area, the Jackson metropolitan area, the Gulf Coast, or all points in between, when you get to an area that's congested and you're waiting in traffic to get from A to B, it was the decision that was forced upon the department to forego the capacity construction program that put us that way. So ideally, you would be doing two things, all relying on data. So you're not building extra lanes of traffic on a highway where it's not needed. But ideally, you would be looking to the future to make sure we're continuing to build out the system to accommodate traffic, while at the same time protecting the existing investment that the taxpayers have. And we've just in the last 3 years gotten to where we're back into a financial situation where we can manage both programs in a good way.
You mentioned early on about the Trump administration and some of the things you're doing there with the congressional delegation from Mississippi. Tell us about kind of the day and night difference between a Biden administration and a Trump administration, because you served under both. The first part of your tenure was under Biden, and then now, obviously, you're working with the federal government under President Trump. But talk about the differences here, because the Biden was focused on the Green New Deal, really stalling infrastructure projects in many regards, or placing a lot of red tape on them. President Trump seems to be streamlining a lot of these projects and systems and processes. So tell us a little bit about the differences.
There's a few things we can unpack with that. The IIJA, that's very much touted infrastructure bill, that was one of the crown jewels of the Biden administration, as they would state. What the part of that huge piece of legislation that dealt with us was only the small part that was the reauthorization of the Federal Highway Administration. There was so much in that infrastructure bill that in no way, shape, form, or fashion had anything to do with what our mission is in building out highways and bridges and carrying out the various modes of transportation. Our part of that bill was one very small part. So it was billed as this huge infrastructure bill that really was overreaching in a lot of different manners. But fortunately for us, the one part that they put into the bill, I think primarily to try to secure the Republican votes necessary to pass the overall bill, was the reauthorization of the Federal Highway Administration. So that was the one part of the bill that helped us. Now, within that was the NEVI program, the electric vehicle charging station program that the Biden administration pushed. It was something that philosophically that I thought was a bad idea. It was going to put government in the place of where we were to go out and take taxpayers' money and build out these charging stations that I thought was somewhat ridiculous. I mean, that would have been no different than the government trying to do that with gas stations, 100 years ago, to try to advance fuel-operated vehicles. That's something that since the Trump administration has come in, I think you've seen a lot of common sense that has been attributed to how we carry out the mission of the Federal Highway Administration as an extension of that to the state government. And I'm happy to say that I attended a meeting with Secretary Duffy, and it was a lot of my counterparts from around the country, both Republican, both Democrat. And there were no real disagreements in the room. That's the good thing about true infrastructure development, is it's not a partisan deal. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, we're all wanting to get our product to the people as quickly and as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible. So when we were around the table with Secretary Duffy, I thought we had maybe the only area in federal government where everybody was kind of on the same page. We were wanting to eliminate what obstacles stood in our way from delivering that product in a efficient manner. Give you an example of something that would be that the Trump administration is working with us on is an environmental document. That's one of the first things that has to be done in one of these large capacity construction projects. Well, by the time you develop that document, you've got normally about 3 years then that you have to get all the rest of these pre-construction phases done in order to start construction. And if it's outside that period of time, you may have to redo that document. So you had places all over the country that were finding themselves running out of time, projects being stalled because they'd have to go back and redo something that had already been done. Mm-hmm. And so the conversation would be around situations like that, where by extending the life of that document, you could allow us to get to the point that we're actually building things. I think one of the advantages that we have is that I'm told that President Trump, if he had any cabinet post that he would like to be, other than obviously the presidency itself, is he'd like to be the Secretary of Transportation, because that gives you the opportunity to really do something, to build things that are tangible. And I see a real desire to remove any obstacles that lie in my colleagues in my way in allowing us to do that in a way that just makes common sense. So, I guess to put it in a nutshell, we've gone from being a part of a political football and a bigger, broader mission and vision to having leadership that's really drilled down on what we're doing and wants us to be able to take the funds the federal government gives us and start building things as quickly as possible, as best as possible. And I think that's something that both Republicans and Democrats alike want and desire. I've seen nobody that's begged for more regulation or to keep the regulation to the extent that we've had it from either side of the aisle in as far as our job is concerned.
Once again, we're talking to Brad White, who's Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation. Brad, we got about 3 minutes left. Last question. I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you this, but I've covered and I want your honest opinion, and I wouldn't expect anything else, but I've covered the state lottery here in Mississippi. I probably bashed it more times than not for a variety of reasons. But nonetheless, part of the pitch back in 2018 was that a large portion of the lottery funds would go to infrastructure, roads and bridges. That's what we were told. And so I don't know if that's happened or not, but you would know. So in your honest perspective, I'm not asking your opinion on the lottery or the legislation, but from your perspective, has that helped? Not is it a good bill, but has the money actually come through, and has it helped do projects?
It's made a difference. I mean, they created a revenue stream that we did not have. The way the law was written was the first $80 million collected by the state with lottery would go to infrastructure. The Transportation Commission chose to put 100% of that money toward 2-lane highways in the state that normally, when you're going through our big programmatic dollars, sometimes may be left behind. In the time that we've had the lottery, we've rehabilitated over 3,000 miles of 2-lane highway, I believe, maybe 3,500, but I think it's probably closer to 3,000 miles of 2-lane highway. I'm told at the time their projections were they thought that would bring in 100 million, so they gave us the first 80. I think it's now bringing in closer to 150 million. The remainder of that above the 80 goes to education, but it goes to them in an unbudgeted fashion. I mean, they never know what that's going to be, so they can't budget for it. And the 80 million that transportation gets had a sunset on it for 2028. So the question will be, will the legislature remove that sunset that allows us to continue to receive the funds to put it into these 2-lane highways around the state? But certainly it's provided a stream of revenue we did not have prior. And it's a total of 80 million. We ensure that 100% of that goes directly to putting pavement on the road on 2-lane highways around the state. And I believe I can say with confidence, excuse me, that with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 counties, we have done that in all of our counties. At least 80 of the counties around the state have seen some type of lottery-connected project to rehabilitate that. So without the money, we would have been behind that. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that there were better ways to create streams of revenue, but nonetheless, the facts are we get 80 million a year. All 80 million goes to 2-lane highways. With that, we probably rehabilitated about 3,000 miles of highway that otherwise would not have been rehabilitated to the extent that it's been.
Well, that's good to hear, because when we passed the bill, I said, we'll see if these roads and bridges get better. We'll see. I was a little skeptical. So at least the money's going where it's supposed to, and yeah, that's going to be interesting in 2028 on the renewal, because
we're hoping that they'll take that up this next session in 2026. I'd like to see them do it in advance of it so we can continue to budget, far out.
Yeah, that's a good point. They need to continue using that money wisely. Otherwise, it'll get flushed into some government program that doesn't benefit any of us. So, hey, Brad White, thank you so much for your work, and appreciate you coming on the program.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. That's Brad White, Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation, and doing a lot of good work there, working with the Trump administration. And Brad's got an extensive career in the political arena for Governor Tate Reeves, a couple of U.S. senators, and has also actually worked in the Department of Transportation going back a couple of decades ago. So he's got a long resume here in the state of Mississippi, working in the government and political movement for Republicans here in the state. So we appreciate Brad coming on and appreciate his work at the Department of Transportation. All right, there you have it, folks. We'll be back in just a few minutes. We've got another guest coming up. Stay tuned.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney Empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
What if healthcare could be more than bills and bureaucracy? What if it could reflect faith, foster community, and offer spiritual support? At Redeem HealthShare Ministry, the mission goes beyond medical bills. It's about honoring Christ and embracing healthcare that aligns with Christian values. Redeem members share medical expenses through monthly contributions, supporting one another in a Christ-centered community. It's not insurance, it's believers helping believers through financial support and prayer. And Redeem HealthShare provides freedom for members to select the doctors, hospitals, and treatments that are right for them. No networks, no restrictions, just faith-driven care. From everyday checkups to unexpected medical emergencies, Redeem offers flexible programs and encouragement rooted in Scripture. Because your healthcare should reflect your faith, not compromise it. More at redeemhealthshare.org.
Hey friends, it's Jessica Peck, Dr. Nurse Mama, as your 1-minute parenting coach. How often do you evaluate your family's tech habits and see how they align with your values? Psalm 139, 23 and 24 says, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting." Technology can have a powerful impact on our lives, but without reflection, it's easy to fall into habits that pull us away from what truly matters. This week, ask yourself, how are our tech habits influencing our relationships and our connections with God? Tracking screen time and evaluating how you use tech can help identify areas that need adjusting. What if you took some time to reflect on how much time your family spends on devices versus engaging in meaningful, faith-centered activities? Is there room to make space for more intentional connections and spiritual growth? Try it out, and I'll see you on the Dr. Nurse Mama Show here on American Family Radio.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Walker Wildmon.
Welcome back to the program here on American Family Radio. Walker Wildmon here with you. Before we jump to our next guest, I want to remind you that we are going to Israel and Greece in 2026, Israel and Greece, March of 2026. So if you want to go with us, go ahead and go over to wildmangroup.com to check out more information, wildmangroup.com to check out more information. And registration closes in December. So if you want to go, then go over to wildmangroup.com to check out the itinerary, the pricing, all the information you need to know over at wildmangroup.com. Well, let's jump to our next guest. Louisiana State Representative Mark Wright is with us. Representative Wright serves District 77 in the state of Louisiana. We've got a pretty big listening audience there in the state of Louisiana. Representative Wright, welcome to the program. Hey, Representative Wright, can you hear me?
Okay, sorry, it was on mute.
That's all right.
Yeah.
We got you loud and clear now.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. I have to tell you, I heard what you were saying about the trip to Israel and Greece, and that sounds like a great trip. So I wish I could go. I'm not sure I can, but I'm sure y'all going to have that's going to be a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We do Israel every year, and then Greece is a new trip that we're doing with the footsteps of Paul there in Athens and Thessalonica, etc. So, Representative Wright, I wanted to ask you, let you give us a little backgrounder on this special session. So, different states do it different ways, but Louisiana has a special session going on right now dealing with some pretty critical items. So give us a little backgrounder here for those who live in Louisiana and even those who have been tracking this in the news.
Yeah, sure. As a matter of fact, it just ended last week. It was very short, and this special session was about making some decisions regarding redistricting and elections related to it. So in 2026, we elect one of our U.S. senators. We elect our federal congressman as well. And then we also have a couple other races related to that. we are going to start closed primaries as well in 26. So there's a fairly significant change. Well, as part of the, I don't want to say mix up, but part of the complication, the Supreme Court has just heard, arguments in a hearing related to a case that we had a few years ago. So we had a special session 2 years ago related to redistricting. And then we actually did redistricting towards the end of last term. And, we have a long history of dealing with that, primarily because of our population, the minority-majority, combination, and what most of us in the legislature would argue, the question about how you draw these districts when it comes to race and other factors that the courts have said you have to consider. So we won't hit, for what it's worth, we will not hear the answer from the Supreme Court until early 2026, which is why in this special session, what we did was we pushed qualifying and the election dates back 2 months. So essentially it gave us some time to get answers and address what kind of, answers we may see.
Yeah, the redistricting is very interesting, and it's been interesting to look at the Democrats act as if redistricting by Republicans is this new phenomena, even though it's been going on for a very long time by both parties, by the way. And even, you look at some states, Republican representatives have been completely blocked out of the congressional delegation because of Democrat redistricting. So it's been a weapon used by the Democrats for a long time. So spare me the outrage. So what you're saying, Representative Wright, is that you guys are, the way I understand it, you guys are potentially going to have to come back for another special session once the Supreme Court has ruled. Is that right, or is that not necessarily true?
No, you're right. You're right. That is quite possible. Hovering over all of this is that we had another case being heard by a federal judge who essentially threatened or told us that she was going to draw the districts a certain way if we didn't do it a certain way. So this stuff gets so complicated. I honestly sometimes just refuse to say anything publicly because, and I'm not, this is just fine, don't get me wrong, but, there's so many cases and so many litigious parties. If you say anything publicly related to it as a legislature, they'll bring you into the case and cross-examine you and all that good stuff. But it's difficult to follow at times, quite frankly, if you're not an attorney like me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we like to keep things simple and in layman terms here on the program. Representative Wright, what are some other things that you guys are looking at for the next legislative cycle? You guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys meet once a year. What are some of the next things that you guys are looking at for the next legislative session?
Yeah, great question. So besides these redistricting special sessions, our new governor is about 2 years in now, really wanted to focus and move fast on a number of issues, including criminal justice. That was one of the first ones we had. We've done a special session with fiscal issues that was last fall in November. And I think there's another one I'm trying to remember. But here's the thing. We alternate sessions. So even years or the full session, it goes from April to the beginning of June. And then in odd years, we have fiscal sessions. So, we had a fiscal session last spring, but because we had that special just 5 or 6 months before, a lot of the work was done then. And this is a short way of saying this next spring will be our regular session, and it really will be the last regular session for this term. Then we'll have a fiscal towards the end of the term. So there's basically 2 years left. And I think, you're paying attention to politics, legislators and the governor and such don't like to take a lot of risks when you start approaching election day. So it will be interesting to see what comes up, but I think it'll be more about local issues, things that people can agree on, or people going to file bills that they know can't pass, so they can signal to their electorate, hey, this is what I'm for, and that type of thing.
Once again, we're talking to State Representative Mark Wright out of Louisiana, serving District 77. We've got a couple minutes left. Mark, tell us about your run for Public Service Commissioner there in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, thanks. We have a Public Service Commission. There's 5 members of it across the state. The districts are fairly large. They're about as big as a congressional district. There's 6-year terms, and you regulate utilities and similar public service issues, right? Electricity is the biggest, with the electrical grid, but it also affects natural gas, and a few other issues that are just common day things that affect us. And so I've always been attracted to sort of the basics of an economy, the type of things where, export grain coming down the river with, on maritime on the Mississippi, or, things like natural gas and export gas and things like that. So that it just seemed to be the type of thing that I would be good at. I've had a few people say, hey, I'm finishing my last term this year, so I'm going to be gone in 2 years anyway. And it just has worked out so far. The election won't be until May, but getting very positive feedback and looking forward to potentially serving. It's just like the legislature. It's a part-time job, meet monthly and address issues. But, it's complicated enough that you have to spend a lot of time, like, nuclear energy, electrical grid, you name it. So that's what I'm running for. And like I said, I feel very positive about where it's going, but of course it's up to the people.
Representative, let me ask you one more question. Speaking of power, the whole energy topic is fascinating to me. I cover it pretty often, but what are we going to do with all these data centers? Because we're throwing up these data centers every other day, and they're consuming vast amounts of energy. And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't be building out data centers. I think AI. I think we have to be the leader in AI as a free market economy. We just have to lead in it. We can't let China lead in AI. But with that being said, energy prices just continue to go up with this expansion of AI data centers. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an issue. And in fact, I think I just read in the Wall Street Journal, a couple other places, there's concerns about a bubble in this stuff, some NVIDIA, there's maybe too much supply in it. Louisiana just had an agreement with Meta on what will be the largest data center in the state. And they have really set the tone for how we think it should happen, which is they put cash on the table to pay for electrical generation, the huge amounts, right? And then that fits into our normal utility. In this case, it's energy. And it should not have any effect on our people individually, consumers, right? So my understanding is that was the first agreement of its kind. So I agree. I think people are starting to see this. There is some concerns, and you got too much going on. And I think the most important part is to figure out before you bring the shovels and start digging, how are you going to do it in a way that it does, the populace isn't affected by it? So that just depends on the state, obviously, but it's the way to go as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Representative Mark Wright, thank you so much for coming on the program. Appreciate your work there in Louisiana.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, y'all. God bless.
All right. Thank you so much. That's Louisiana State Rep Mark Wright, serving District 77 and also putting his hat in to run for Public Service Commissioner there in the state of Louisiana. Yeah, this data center and energy topic is a fascinating one. And when you look at the share of energy prices over the last even 12 to 24 months, they just continue to skyrocket. I mean, the chart on energy cost is almost just a straight line up. And, this is on the back end of COVID and inflation and everything going up, as everybody can attest to. So the solution here is going to be, in my opinion, nuclear. I think nuclear is the solution, in large part to these data centers. And I've covered the modular nuclear reactors and that technology. It's pretty fascinating how you can fit a nuclear power plant within like a football field or less, actually, and produce enough power for an entire city or an entire data facility without pulling off of the traditional grid infrastructure. So, but what Representative Wright there talked about with Meta, what they did in Louisiana, to me, that seems to be the way to go. Let's let these tech companies that are raking in billions of dollars in money, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with raking in billions. Good for them. But if they're going to set up shop and just suck energy off of the grid, then they need to have some skin in the game. They need to invest in the infrastructure, in the build-out, and the power generation so that the rest of the community that they're supposedly serving doesn't get negatively affected by this mass power consumption. But this is going to have to be done quickly, and I don't think there's anything that can be done quick enough to fend off the short-term implications and the short-term pain of high energy prices. I just think that's just baked in. You can't pump out these modular nuclear reactors fast enough to keep up with the data centers. You just can't because of all the regulations. So they're talking 24 to 36 months out on best case scenario, with the Trump administration expediting the approval of these new modular nuclear reactors. So meanwhile, they're putting these data centers online like every other week. So something's going to have to give. And this whole Green New Deal and shunning nuclear for the last 30 years is really going to come back to bite us because we've been denying the science, denying the data. We've been Hollywood's been making everybody scared of nuclear. And here we are, and we don't have enough power. That's a problem. We'll see you next time.